sir.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome. I really appreciate everyone coming out tonight. My name's Mick Kennedy, publisher of Bass Clef Books, small independent publisher which began in 2022 in the heart of Kentucky. I would like to thank Lori Meyer and Neighborly Books for allowing us this beautiful space to celebrate a new published work, Ted Higgs, A Love Embargo, that features a truly amazing image from a painting by Pinky Mystery, which is right here to the right. I've known Ted for 20 plus years, beginning at Elizabethtown Community and Technical College where we taught. He served as director of the art gallery, and we found a mutual interest in poetry. Together we founded a small writing group, the Writers' Round Table, arranged for readings and worked together on college's journal, the Heartland Review, which is still going strong. What can I say about Ted's work? I've been reading Ted for 20 plus years. This is the 4th volume of his poetry that I've published, and he always finds a way to impress me. Anyone who reads his work will admire his precision in the line, a rich field of imagery and a subtle musicality. Perhaps most astonishing is the historicity of his work. His life is woven into each poem, and so we have places, indeed landmarks, that we perhaps have read about, and persons distant in time yet familiar, and experiences that are unique in how Ted renders them. Please help me welcome Ted Higgs.
Well, thank you, Mick, for those kind words, and thank everyone for coming. This is interesting. I have sort of a combination of family, friends, and colleagues here, which is truly amazing. My brother George and his wife Sharon came. George flew in from Memphis. Well, we can edit that. At any rate, what I plan to do tonight is to read some poems from this book, and about halfway through I'll read a few from the last book, Scoring the Darkness, and then I'll return to A Love Embargo to finish it out. Okay. The first poem in the collection is called Fragrances of Lilacs. The scent lingers after the action passes, the fragrance and her gossamer gown, lilacs across the table and beside, the sweet smell a counterpoint to the fact of our imminent farewell. In the distance, the Larissa train powers past, its sound and speed the only nod to the passage of time. Somewhere in the distance, a bouzouki sounds one faint chord, like the sudden flash of summer lightning, as on Tinos, where we danced under the stars that summer awaiting passage home. Before us, our last evening meal in country, keftedes, salad, and baklava, a sweetness that would sit upon our lips, and the resinous wine of our new home. That taste and a fragrance that lingers still across continents, recalled often at twilight in the hush of evening, as now, looking back, the lilac pulse of the air alive again, the melody here from dulcimers, whose dulcet chords carry through to Compline, tapped softly out as code upon the night, sound and scent, lilac memories, a fusion of the heart. So, Fragrance of Lilacs.
Do we go yay or applause?
Well, whatever, but you know.
That was lovely.
Well, as I told Mick, I've narrowed it down to about 3 hours of poetry, so you're
We won't applaud.
I got a really scared look here in the front. This one is called Listening to the Night. Long after the day's last sound, the silence of night surrounds us. its translation clear in the breeze on which it rides, advancing like a friend invisible in the shadows. There are thoughts that hang just beyond arm's length in the darkness, friendships and companions, a certain loneliness like a good wine to be savored, a bouquet of solitude, the loud absence of sound, and love's dissolved memories, silent like the space between notes, an unwritten score played out in dream by lovers, the meter of their private music set by long practice, allegro ma non troppo. There the soubrettes of my imaginings beckon me to join them, the female cast of a play whose pages remain uncut in the volume of future time, as they fade, leaving me alone in the reasoned light of morning, where a wink and a gentle nod replace the parting kiss, left in the night, on the wind, on the soft breeze of evening. There's one thing in there that some of you may not understand, and let's see. The uncut pages, when they first did printing press, they would print a long sheet and then they would fold it, okay? And if you think about it, what happens when things get folded, I don't have an extra sheet, well, here it is. When things get folded and put in a volume, what happens? Hard to turn the page, right? You have to cut it. And so when novels were first written and books were bound, you would know that you were getting a new book because the pages would be uncut. Mm-hmm. And you knew that you were getting a book that had already been read if the pages were cut. Okay? So uncut pages of a future time. See, you're learning stuff tonight. There'll be a quiz after. Okay. Let's see. This one's called Mountain Bike. Through the branches, the sun warms me in the early morning, the mountains grand and the air sparkling with promise. Today I'm riding with memories, a ride never taken but promised. The tires spin over the fallen leaves, moving forward. The soft, undulant hills pulsing across time, passing the hardy hiker, or more often, out-of-state trucks and cars coming to visit, passing the occasional deer, birds aflutter, moss hanging like the pennons of old forts, and vines sweeping down the gap, the hem of the dawn's gown of fractal dreams, shaken by the wind, rocking and rising like the sea at sunset off blue Naxos. From the forest floor, a fragrance vaguely remembered from one's youth and distance, voided by the remaining leaves, of hues, a kaleidoscope across the canyon, a shot that rings out, sirens, humanity's sound, filtered through the pure air of the hills, a lazy mountain stream, stones smooth centuries past, the murmuring rush of wave, a sound like the gentle voice of a forest sprite, singing to her love in soft attenuated shadow of the foothill's wooden edge. Mountain bike. I figured anything with mountains is going to go over. This one is called On Discovering That Theodorakis Lived. And some of this I will, the information will be included in the poem. But Theodorakis was a Greek composer, wonderful, beautiful, beautiful music. And when I was taking Greek in Monterey, California, my wife and I fell in love with Theodorakis, and we would go raid the music stores up in San Francisco. And so I arrived in Greece with a whole stack of records. Of course, by that time, the junta had taken over the government, outlawed Theodorakis' music, which we loved. And of course, I didn't know that at the time, but I was quickly reminded of that. The junta was an interesting time. I had one of my troops painted a peace symbol on a fence behind his house. he was arrested in jail, and I had to go fish him out of jail for painting a peace sign. There's an irony in there somewhere. Okay. On discovering that Theodorakis lived, I was driving to the city on some odd chore, listening to the radio, and heard them announce a concert in Madison Square Garden, and Theodorakis, surely a mistake. We had assumed him dead long before, one of our musical heroes, our introduction to Greek folk music so long ago, Monterey in the late 60s, and San Francisco with its myriad record stores. Little did we know such music would be banned by the time our collection arrived. We had put a record on, and our doorman came rushing over to warn us, a chargeable offense. Music beautiful but illegal. And so we reserved tickets far back in the mezzanine seats, and on the day took the train down early, waiting then for the gates to open, near a toy store. In its window a large bear beckoned us. So then the three of us went in to hear the long-dead composer perform. What a concert it was, buoyed by memories of Retsina and Dancing Under the Stars. The bear's still with me in my study, watching me compose or grade exams, and sometimes I'll put Theodorakis on and look over at my musings to see if he remembers the music or the one who was with us so many years ago. Okay, enough of that. Okay. This
Should
one,
have come with you tonight.
what?
The bear should have been here.
Oh yeah, well, stuffed animals, and that point will come up here in a minute. This one is called Round Pond. Round Pond is one of the recreational areas of West Point, the military academy. Most people see pictures of the academy on the river, but the academy goes inland a bit. There are training areas in there where the young troops, especially in the first year, are acclimated to military life and so forth. And it is where we have my department. It was a philosophy and English department. We had an annual picnic, but this is like picnic with caviar and so forth. And so I thought it might be worth a poem. This is called Round Pond Recreation Area, West Point, New York. The annual athletic endeavor, it was called, although it was neither athletic nor an endeavor, but rather an excuse to gather, champagne and lobster, a picnic for princes, doubtless now scattered like leaves newly fallen. The pond itself, a marvelous backdrop, a quiet reserve, secluded, not far from the training fields. A curious counterpoint. Inside the lodge there'd be music, sweeping introductions of new instructors, and kudos for work done. Professors of English and philosophy in repose. I imagine myself sitting there now, musing, watching the geese circling like old saber jets about to land, a soft wind rippling the dark surface, waves whispering like lost comrades, the rental boats docked by the lodge, beating softly against their moorings as retreat sounds in the distance, and for a moment the world stops to salute in the dempsey light as I await the cool drape of darkness, the evening's pall, and the bonfire sparks of the vibrant stars. And there's one thing in here that Mike may remember this, and some of the rest of you may. The old saber jets, when they flew, when they were approaching an airfield, they didn't reduce altitude gradually. They would fly in at the same elevation, and then they would peel off, and they would circle around and come landing in. And I spent many an afternoon sitting at the foot of the runway watching the saber jets land. Kind of cool. I would go back. Okay, see, another thing one learns, history. Okay, this is called Search Engine Blues. Yeah. Every time I try to use the computer, something goes wrong. Mick had a poetry reading the other night, and I was supposed to be there. I wanted to be there, but for some reason the computer was telling me that session didn't exist, but 18 other people were there. I don't know what's going on. Yeah, that reminds me of a funny cartoon. I forget the name of the guy, the character, but there's a pelican or some type of bird behind him, and the face of his computer is now exploded. And the bird says, "I didn't know you could delete the entire internet." That's what I face when I use a computer. Okay, search engine blues. I've been searching for a friend on Google, an army buddy, a language school chum, but no luck. The perfect combination of prompts puzzles me. The permutation of names and places remains endless. At every turn, I'm introduced instead to 1,000 would-be friends, people who probably don't really want to meet me, those with cases pending, those who've died, but none I recognize. His old address comes up for sale, and going to the site, I scroll through the photos, imagining him in his hot tub or behind his bar, holding his guitar, the old Calvary hat ever at the ready, and I must smile at the putting green. He loved his golf. And yes, I've used that prompt to no avail. Maybe someday I'll return to the hunt, trying other combinations. For now, I'm content to live with these memories, his sense of humor, his mustachioed smile, the song he wrote for his infant daughter, now middle-aged, no doubt, as fortune's wheel ticks off another bit of precious time. Okay. Well, we talked about the stuffed bear. This one involves the stuffed animals. It's called "Thank Goodness for Stuffed Animals," and the subtitle is "A Quarantine Lament." This was written about the pandemic. You know, I had gone into proctor an exam, and for that good deed, I was told by the school I couldn't leave my house. Okay. The email said not to leave the house for 2 weeks, that I'd been exposed proctoring senior comps at the college. Totally unexpected, as one could tell by my bare pantry and empty fridge. A friend offered to help. She was going to Walmart anyway. Okay, I said, a few vegetables and some dinner rolls. But she never came, and I have no clue why. With imagination, much can be made from frozen vegetables, pasta, and wine. Wasn't worried about loneliness, having played the solitary for several years, and still on speaking terms, as one might say, with all our stuffed animals, acquired over a lifetime, all shapes and sizes, an eclectic mixture, company enough, each bearing memories, their own narrative, a lengthy silence spanning many years, a new chapter with each passing day. Okay, now I'm going to read a couple from Scoring the Darkness. I'll bring up my other little book. There were a couple of copies, but I don't know if there are any left. It's on the Bassclef Books website, in case you're interested in that. This one is called Watching Satellites, and most of you aren't old enough to remember this. Now, when we first started shooting satellites up, they were at a slightly lower elevation, and you could actually see them crossing in the sky. And there were so few of them that most local papers published the schedule. So, okay, the satellite's going to show up at 9 o'clock. You're out there, you're on top of the roof, or you're out in the silo or something, watching the satellite go by. So I sort of took that theme here. Okay, watching satellites. We climbed to the roof of the peanut silo, anxious to watch its passing. The schedule posted in the local paper. The satellite should pass directly overhead just after 9. And so we waited. The satellite, an obvious excuse. 2 kids alone on a high roof. I was beginning to like science, assuming our positions well before 9, not wishing to miss anything. The gentle sway of the silo, the soft breeze, the distant barking dog, the lingering smell of apple pie, if only imagined, and we above exploring nature in our own way, the world spinning at its own steady pace as we lay there. And finally it came cresting the horizon, a star moving across our heaven, banking behind low clouds, complicit in this rite of passage, west to east, a transit of several minutes. Several peak moments, our breath clouding the sky before us, knowing what we learned would not last, but spin its way into history, remembered as the beginning of a dream, two spirits adrift in fixed space, watching another's passage, wishing again to fly. Okay, one, two, and this one is called Minaret, and I think this is one that Kim mentioned in one of the blurbs that he had written for me. It's about a mosque that sits in a town in northern Greece, in a region called Epirus. April and I climbed. It was the first mosque that we'd ever been in. One of the references in the poem is to the murder of Ali Pasha, who was called the Lion of Yanina. He was the Turkish overlord for the region. And I also mention a place called Dodona. And if you've done any mythology or whatever, Dodona was the site of a cult to Jupiter, or to Zeus rather. Minaret. The first time we climbed a minaret, we were surprised at the small steps, the spiral felt in the bones and the endless turning, an island in the lake and the wind whispering. You could almost hear the rounds rising like heat from the soul of the land, the strayed loon gliding past. A moment paused in place, like the ancient marbles in nearby Dodona, where we sat listening to the distant bleating of sheep and the deep rumbling of silence rolling down the valley in huge waves. On Lake Pambodida, the Anhan called from where we stand, sounds skimming the surface, blending with the Orthodox chant from the island monastery. Where are they now, our Greek friends with whom we left behind the sheath of early chapters? This is a lament for them all, impossible to hold together, blown by the winds of history and time. Even the minaret is gone, bowing finally to age, as all things eventually must. Okay. A couple more from this, and then we'll go back to the love embargo. This one's called Miramar Beach. One of my uncles had investigated which of the possible beaches might have the best sand. And it was a beach down on the Gulf Miramar Beach. The beach was said to have the finest sand. It was enough for me, the roiling wave repeating its tattoo upon the shore. I had heard that our au pair would bathe in the surf at dawn, so each day early I sat waiting, hoping she would rise like Venus from the foam, but never did. Not sure at this vantage what I expected had she come out dripping, nor what answers I was hoping for. Questions still remain. Perhaps it is enough that she came forth fragmented, the truth of her gender, a collage of memories, pasted haphazardly into the weathered scrapbook of my life. Recollections like painted props, lowered onto a stage of actors, desperate to find direction before the final exit and curtain, before the lights dim and the primordial silence returns. Okay. One more from this, and then we'll go back. I know you all are eager to get back to the Prosecco. So, let's see. All right. This is called Back in Country. Actually, this is a memory of a future event. Just before the pandemic, Vandy had asked me to accompany some of her friends back to Italy. And I thought that was a great idea. Then the pandemic hit, and I got tired of waiting so that I could write a poem about it. And so here's a poem about a future event that hasn't happened yet, but it will. Okay.
Cindy, you're paying for it.
I returned to my adopted land, shepherded by 3 beautiful souls from Tennessee. They wanted to see the Italian countryside, as a native might, a noble experiment. A Belgian colleague once complained of Americans overseas, even expatriates, who never write once they return home. So here we are in Vittorio Veneto in the spring, climbing the cobbled path above Serravalle, the antique town. Its celebrated square, its narrow streets traversed as one passes into the hills, and mountain valleys and lakes beyond. And here we are sitting in the piazza, drinking our cafe, recalling the troops that danced across the echoing stones, enjoying the leisure, the medieval charm. Soon we will stroll back into present time to watch the landscape sweeping by outside the train, the life we came to love, tranquil, unencumbered, natural, and free. My 3 friends busy emailing their photos to friends, capturing on drives memories engraved indelibly upon my heart. Okay. So now we'll return to Love Embargo. This one is called the treadle, and some of you will know what that word means. It's a little foot pedal on an old sewing machine, right? Okay. Long before my feet could reach it, I would sit quietly watching it move, back and forth, a regular rhythm established by the feet of my great aunt, as she would slide the cloth forward, sewing the odd dress or skirt, biting off the thread. There was always some preparation, the pattern's arrival in the mail, the thread selected, the material measured out and cut. The machine sat quietly in the corner, waiting to be called into service, its knobs, bobbins, and levers always a mystery, only she knew how to master. And I would sit beside her to watch the magic. I came upon it once alone, to explore, and nestled my foot upon it, pushing slowly. I saw the needle hesitate, then plunge downward and back, a first experience, like many others since. Excited, unknowing, but curious enough to take what was to come. My aunt tried explaining it all to me and let me set the pace of the treadle, but it was the earlier joy of the unknown I loved most, the rhythm and mystery, something certain as little else has been. The treadle. This one is called Debbie in the Garden, and some of you that have followed Debbie on Facebook know that one of the first things that she did when she got to Maryville was to put in a garden behind her house. So this is, and I got permission to use her name on it. So Debbie in the Garden. Kneeling before her plants, she sets to work, her gentle hands shaping the soft, damp soil around the young bulbs, as though caressing a child's face, tracing the spaces between, bringing beauty to her garden kingdom, like a woodland sprite or airy sylph, and natural, her face radiant in the sun. The little garden by the deck, now home to her familiars, its border old wood repurposed, her magic just beginning. And so our destiny provides its own small joys, including this present instance. Potential promises caught on the cusp of new beginnings, rising like the sun. There is an innocence here, so fragile, a delicacy despite the surrounding chaos, recalled at moments like these, watching her giving new life and hope to all she touches, all poised to open in splendor like the lily, the stargazer awakening to a new dawn. Okay, and this one, Mick told me was his favorite in the collection. It's called The Bear. Last night in her dreams, the bear attacks again, and her son dashes in to see what's wrong. Nothing, just a bad dream. Next day, rising early, she sees a shape, a shadow moving uphill and away, slouching uphill in the neighbor's yard. Could it be the bear, conjured on the strength of a dream? Would that it were that easy. But what are we to make of the attack, the bear? Some problem in her social life, leaving her in the early morning fog? My bear, you ask? Perhaps a sweet caress. Would that leave too at dawn or linger? A breeze brushing my cheek at twilight, a kaleidoscope of faces in the night, every slight twist yielding a different face, the turning impossible to stop. Such the fleeting fate of beauty. I'd almost rather have the bear than this, a compass turning on an infinite base. So the bear. Okay. Only a few more. Okay, this is called Waiting for the Night Song. The tent flaps beat retreat as the wind passes and the air grows quiet once again, as though the woods were waiting. The fire crackles and sparks drift skyward to join the stars, passing the pale moon whose ring promises the coming storm. And in the distance, an owl begins its night song, and the evening watch passes to the night creatures, now opening their crepuscular eyes as the spring sky spreads its arms to the vagrant meteors that skip diagonally across the drape of heaven, a stitch sewn into the garment of night. Soon school will begin anew, but for now there's peace, restful nights and days spent in mountain seclusion, where problems come only when called, balanced in these gnarled hands like a nest found beneath the pines. The lantern sputters, breaking the silence. Its dim glow peoples the tent sides, images like shadows in a street show for children who stand in awe of the unfolding tale. What would you have made of this retreat, I wonder, of the quiet night, an escape perhaps from the objects of memory and the known? The shows that I was talking about, the street shows, in Japan in the 50s, they would have little puppet shows out on the street, and the kids would gather around. It's kind of neat. Okay, and the title poem, A Love Embargo. I have decided to impose an embargo on love, valid until friendship means more than Facebook pals, and await the embrace of angels that coupled with the giants once at the beginning of time. Perhaps this is but self-defense, avoiding the obvious surprise one sees in the face of others at even the slightest nod of pleasantry. Let that be enough, as perhaps it should be, but a fine patina remains, like tea stains on a favorite cup after many an afternoon tea, or a palimpsest of emotion that lies just below the surface, rising when called, on hearing a familiar tune or word that takes me back to an earlier day, smelling orange scent and recalling a stroll through an Italian orchard years ago. These are the beautiful barbs that remind and promise splendors that are yet to come. So, Love Embargo. The use of that as the title for the book was actually Mick's suggestion, and I think it works out very well. This one, I'll read two more. This one is actually a reflection on two different pavilions. One is a pavilion on campus that some of you are familiar with, and the other is a pavilion in an estate where we lived in Belgium. A baron had died, and he had a large estate. He had a chateau, and he had an thatched roof cottage, which in French is a chaumière, which is what we rented. But there was also, in the very middle of the park, a moated pavilion, and from that there were avenues of huge trees that worked their way out from there. We were the only, well, the park was open to the public in the week, on the weekend, but on the weekdays was ours. And we had deer and pheasant and so forth. It was really, really pretty because there were little paths through it and that kind of thing. And so this is called Pavilion. Below the parking lot where the trails begin, the college pavilion stands, host to dreams that lurk in the hours between dog and wolf, when lovers begin their twilight walks and dialects of smoke rise into the air from barbecues freshly lit, the day's cares fading into the ether of the night. Some evenings I stroll these darkening woods, as once along the arbored lanes of Anguien in our private park, its moated center, a pavilion home to weekend concerts, music echoing through the dappled woods above a blanket of pastel heather, and just beyond our chaumière, its thatch draped over the eaves like a mop of hair, shading the brow of an ancestral lord. The Belgian park recalled as I begin my stroll in the fading light of evening. So the pavilion. Yeah, they would do weekend concerts there. The pavilion it was large, and in most photos it looks real small, but then you see the people. Right? Photography is wonderful. Okay, this is the final poem, and its title is Philo. This is a dialect word in Veneto dialect, which means the tradition of gathering in the wintertime in the stables to take advantage of the animal heat. And so all your friends and community would show up and you sit around, sing songs or drink wine, whatever. It was also the name of a cultural group that I belonged to in Vittorio Veneto. The city was amazing. It had roughly 30,000 people. There were 45 cultural groups. One of them was the art group that Abel actually ran it, but she and I were in charge of it. And it begins with an epigraph from a poet, Nina Alexander. She was born in India and she became an American poet. She died in 2018. And the quotation is, "Memory is all you have." Very short. Okay, I'm going to use some Italian words in the very first line. Nelle stalle means in the stables. Okay. They gather nelle stalle in winter to share the animal warmth, to share the latest news under a blanket of snow. As the kids slid downhill on makeshift sleighs and the adults looked to chores, their dialect, the local Veneto, the sweet chords of the language of the mountains. And so they gather, the young folks playing their games, the adults swapping their tales as they sip their grappa, gazing across the valley as the moist evening snow fog rolls in, catching the golden rays of the dying sun, sparkling like glitter, glowing with the transport of generations. These are the people I recall, places revealing themselves like shadows past at night along the road, reshaped slowly by the heart, friends and lovers conjured like spirits waiting to cross the frozen pond, the journey worth both the pain and the joy. Okay, that's it. Now it's time for some more Prosecco. Thank you. And I will sign books for sure.
Just want to thank everybody for coming out. Bass Clef Books, you can follow us on Facebook or Twitter. And thank you, Pinky. Thank you, Lori. And I forgot to thank Vandy before, who put out the nice spread for us tonight. So thank you all and have a wonderful evening. Thank you guys for coming out.
Martin, right?
Yeah.
M-A-R.
B-A-R.
Did you want to turn that on?
Not enough.
City Council.
Oh, it's so sweet. And so,